Welcome. I'm really pleased this afternoon to find myself here in the chamber of the Scottish Parliament with Ellie Craig, who is the chair of the Scottish Youth Parliament. And it takes me back to, I think it was autumn 2024, Ellie, when you and I chaired a session of the Scottish Youth Parliament here in this very place.
Yeah, it was a really great event, and it was our 25th anniversary. It's also been the Parliament's 25th anniversary that year as well, although the Scottish Youth Parliament's one day older.
Oh, well, there we go. There we go. I reflect on it frequently. It was a very lively day, a lot of good questions coming from the floor, and a lot of debate, but always courteous and good-natured. I'm just interested in what got you involved in the Scottish Youth Parliament in the first place.
Yeah, I'm thinking back, it was 7 years ago now that I was first elected as an MSP for Glasgow Cathcart, and it was actually my modern studies teacher who'd sort of said, the Scottish Youth Parliament are holding elections, I guess you're pretty confident and outspoken, why don't you put yourself forward? And I think I always felt like I should speak out if I thought there was injustices or that there was something I wanted to change. I think a big part of it for me at the time was education and making sure that the education system worked for young people. And so I put my hat in the ring against 7 other people. Didn't think I was going to win. And I guess here I am now. The rest is history.
And how do you find that electoral process for the Scottish Youth Parliament?
Yeah, I think it's pretty brutal actually at times. I think young people can be some of the harshest critics from your peers, but it's really great. And I think it's one of those examples where young people from 12 to 25 can vote and they use their Young Scot card, and it's local authorities, all 32, help us to run those elections. And so I think it's really a great show of getting young people to have their voices heard from a really young age, and obviously preparing them to vote at 16 in Scotland. So for me, it's the first step in that process.
And it's a really inclusive parliament. I mean, that seems to be baked in to the selection procedure.
Yeah, I think so. We don't have like quotas or anything, but it just so happens that our demographics are pretty overrepresentative in most categories. So we have a roughly 50-50 gender split, which is something that I'm really proud of, because I think it's really important that young women are getting involved in politics. And I hope that that can then be reflected in the future, and when, as young women get older and maybe want to go into, I guess, real politics, as you say.
Oh, I think your politics are very, very real. I reflect often that if the Scottish Youth Parliament decide to campaign on an issue, it's pretty successful. How do you decide which campaigns you're going to focus on?
Yeah, so every 5 years we hold a big national consultation and we create a manifesto. So our recent one is going to run from 2026 to 2031 for the upcoming Scottish Parliament election. And so we go out and consult young people from across Scotland, and we have 31 issues and across 5 themes, so that young people can pick what are the top issues for them. So our current round of campaigns, the top issues are mental health, ending gender-based violence and youth work. So there'll be a new set of issues for the new Scottish Parliament.
Okay. I've definitely got a copy of that manifesto.
Yes.
And I think you're very good at making sure that everyone who needs to see it does see it.
Yes, we made sure to leave everybody's MSPs one a letter from their MSYP alongside a copy of the manifestos, make sure that people were getting it as soon as it was released.
So you've been involved for several years, but is it the case that elections happen every 2 years?
Yes, so the next election is in November of this year. So I'll be standing down at that time, but it'll be a new Scottish Youth Parliament.
And
yes.
Why are you standing down?
Well, I think after 7 years, I think it's probably time for me to move on. I'm about to graduate in politics and sociology at the University of Glasgow. So once I get my degree, I think I'm going to sort of close the youth politics chapter of my life and see what's next.
Okay, so politics is obviously something you're very, very passionate about. And, you are potentially thinking about working in this?
I'm not sure.
area?
I think I definitely want to work within the political landscape, but I'm not sure if elected politics is really for me right now. I think it's quite concerning sometimes, I think especially the way that I see young women and women treated in the media around politics. So I will say it does put me off a little bit from sort of being in the limelight.
Okay, that's really interesting, and it's probably something that you're hearing from women young and old about how it can feel. Do you think social media has any impact on that?
Oh, definitely. I think I'm on the social media and I see the sort of abuse online that elected representatives get from all genders, but also especially women, and the kind of targeted personal abuse that I think you see. And it really is quite scary, actually.
I think it was really, it really did strike me the day that we were chairing in here how, just how courteous that debate was. That people were disagreeing on certain issues, but it was always very respectful.
Yeah, and I think it's something that's the real sort of ethos and value, which is that we teach people to sort of argue against the issue or the specific policy stance based on evidence, and it's sort of taken personality politics out of it. But I think sometimes that maybe doesn't translate to the chamber for the sort of older MSPs.
Do you think that there are many members? I mean, we obviously are aware of people who have been members of the Scottish Youth Parliament who then go on to become involved. Do you see that happening with the current cohort?
Yeah, I think there's definitely always a few who are really interested in kind of elected traditional politics, but I actually think that more often than not people go on to become youth workers or work in the charity or third sector, and kind of use those campaigning skills in a variety of different ways. But I think that's what I like most about it, is you meet people who are studying medicine or people who are studying politics or law, and so there's kind of loads of routes that it can take you afterwards.
And with regards to the way that your candidates are elected, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, so there's a candidate sort of development phase. So local authorities, the youth work teams within local authorities will recruit to see who wants to sort of run to be a member of the Scottish Youth Parliament. And then there's a campaigning phase like any other election. And then young people will go out and cast their vote using their Young Scot card usually, or some still use paper ballots. And then they're elected, and we do a lot of training and development.
And people who aren't successful, do they often come back and have another bash?
Yeah, I think so. I think I've seen it a few times, but I think what's really important is they tend to then go on to engage within their local authority and things like local youth councils or youth work services. So they're not sort of lost. They don't just stand for election and then there's nothing for them to do. There's always young people who are campaigning for different issues locally as well.
And who can vote in the Scottish Youth Parliament elections?
So all young people aged 12 to 25 can vote.
And I think I read at maybe the last election, 80,000 young people voted.
Oh, I think so. I'm not sure of the exact statistic off the top of my head. It feels like quite a while ago now. But yeah, we do get a lot of young people turning out to vote, which is great because it really strengthens our democratic mandate when we're talking to representatives.
Yeah, that's true. And I think it's fair to say that, there's still too many people who don't vote, who never vote. So I think anything we can do to encourage that is a very good thing.
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's a real opportunity in Scotland because we do have votes at 16. So young people who are engaging in schools or youth clubs, we have them there that we can teach them about how you can engage in democratic processes and have your voice heard, because young people do tend to turn out quite low in comparison to other age groups. So I think it's a big part of our work to try and improve that.
And is there anything going on here in Holyrood at the moment that's of particular interest to young people?
Yeah, I think it's obviously International Women's Day this Sunday and the International Women's Day Summit this Saturday, which we're both going to be at. I'm really looking forward to that. And I think there's been a lot of work to get young women more involved within democracy. So it's been really nice to see that shape up in the Parliament.
Yeah, no, I'm very much looking forward to it. I think we always do a good job of celebrating achievements of women, but also reflecting and challenging the change that still needs to happen.
Yeah, and I think it's really nice that both of those things can happen at once, because it is right that we should celebrate how far we've come and the stuff we've still got to do at the same time, and not just kind of have one side of the coin.
Yeah, you'll know that we've undertaken a gender-sensitive audit. It's that's the name of it, but very much looking at how we make a parliament for all, how to make Holyrood more inclusive. And I know you were saying that the Scottish Youth Parliament is pretty well balanced in that regard. We currently have 45% membership of the Parliament as women, but we've yet to join one of the very few parliaments globally who actually are truly gender representative.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And again, I think it's that reason why young women might leave politics, is because they don't see themselves represented. And so it's really important that our Parliament is representative of the population.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that we don't see any slipping back, when we have the elections on the 7th of May, because 45% has actually been a massive jump forward. Parliament's always been about low 30s to high 30s women. So to get over that 40% barrier has been a step forward. And I'm very, I'm going to remain hopeful until I see otherwise, but I do hope that we continue to see progress there. And the fact that our work means that Parliament now has 34 recommendations before it to implement to make sure that not only are women represented here, but that their voices are actually heard here, that carries on.
Yeah, because I guess representation is kind of the first stage, and actually it's important that everybody is thinking about how to make policies more inclusive. So that's why I'm really such a fan that the gender sensitive audit sort of looks wider and not just kind of having a specific group of people looking at specifically women's issues, but how does it intersect across all policy issues?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been looking at various factors because it is one thing having women in the room, but are they being heard? And some of our, we sort of did a little audit over a period of weeks and recognised that women were less likely to make interventions, but that men's interventions were more likely to be taken. So there's something in the way that we debate too, and you'll probably find yourself as a chair, you're working hard all the time to make sure everyone's voice is heard.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that a lot of good participation practices can be reflected in how we do young people's participation. So making sure that there's a variety of different ways for people to participate. So not all young women or not every person will want to stand and be an elected representative, but they might want to fill out a consultation or have their views heard on an issue that really matters to them. So I think it's really important that there's a variety of ways for people to get involved.
Yeah, I think that is key. I mean, when people come into Parliament, some of them have had a lot of debating experience in various environments, whereas others it's entirely new. They may have been involved in business or, they could have come from practically any walk of life. So to find yourself in that formal debating environment, at the Scottish Youth Parliament as well, is quite a big deal.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it can be quite intimidating, especially when you're sort of in the heat of a debate. I've sat in the public gallery quite a few times, and sometimes it can be quite comedic, actually, how people present their arguments in debate. And so some of it would definitely intimidate me.
And yeah, on those differences, are there any marked, I think you've touched on it there, differences you see between the Scottish Youth Parliament and the Scottish Parliament?
Yeah, I mean, other than age, I would probably say there's a lot of difference in kind of the gravitas that goes about it. I think that there's a lot of people who maybe, don't know if grandstand's the right word, but there's definitely people who want to get like a sound bite. Because I think right now within politics, traditional media and reporting is getting less popular, and it's kind of these short clips for social media. So I think a lot of the time when you watch Parliament TV, you can sort of see where the sound bite might be. So I think that's the big difference, I would say.
Yeah, I think social media is impacting on the way things are reported. We read that a lot of young people in particular are looking to TikTok and other sources for information and engagement. So I suppose politicians, are very keen to make sure that as many constituents, as wide an electorate as possible can hear them and see them. Although it's fair to say, I think when you haven't grown up with a particular medium, you might struggle to use it most effectively.
Yeah, I think so. We recently actually did a piece of research alongside Young Scot, and it was looking at young people in politics more generally, but specifically where do they get their political information from? Because we kind of guessed it might be social media, but we found overwhelmingly that 2/3 of young people, sort of every day or every few days, they go to social media to find out what's happening in the world, not just in politics, but geopolitics. And young people reported that they don't tend to go to sort of an adult in their community, but they look online for information, which is a real opportunity, but there's also a lot of harm that can come from that around sort of misinformation and disinformation.
Yeah, I think we do have concerns, as we approach an election, that can have an impact. It's, obviously education has a role to play in making sure that people know how to challenge that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think giving young people the skills to be sort of media literate, have those critical thinking skills. We're doing a bit of campaign work with Ofcom about how to get young people the right tools and the messages they need to be able to challenge information they think that might not be correct.
And, we have committees here in Parliament, and I think it's fair to say there's work ongoing, and through the gender sensitive audit as well, to make sure that they are as representative as possible. It is the case that there are still a couple that are single-sex committees or very much representative of one group rather than another. Is this an issue that you engage with at all?
In terms of Scottish Parliament committees, yeah, I think so. We give evidence quite a lot to the Education, Children and Young People Committee on issues that sort of come through there, which they might think that the Scottish Youth Parliament could have something to add. I do think it's important that on specific issues that it's broadly representative, which is why I think when it's a Children and Young People portfolio, for example, it's really important that young people then get the chance to give evidence on those issues. And I think it's the same with sort of other groups. So if it's a women's issue, not just looking to the MSPs who are women, but actually casting the net wider, and what do wider groups of women from different areas of society think.
And how have you found that evidence-giving process?
Yeah, I really enjoyed giving evidence. I think it can be quite daunting. I don't know if they were maybe being nice to us because we were young, but it was very good. It was very challenging, and it's really great to be able to be right in front of someone and ask them questions that they kind of have to then give an answer to. And if they don't, then why do they not have an answer to that? And it's kind of that conversational, but also that real opportunity to hold people to account.
Mm-hmm. No, I think the Parliament very much listens to the voice of the Scottish Youth Parliament. Is there anything you'd like to see us focus on in particular in future to make sure that our working together has optimal outcomes?
Yeah, I think that the Parliament does such great work. We work a lot with the Participation in Communities team, and they do a lot to engage various groups of young people. I think for me it's really important that we bridge that gap between sort of local engagement and national engagement, and how can the Parliament best support that? Because I know you do a lot of work with the education team bringing different school groups into Parliament, and I guess for us it would be how can we kind of match up that engagement so that we can get the best possible outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, I think your campaigns are always pitched very clearly. I think they're probably a good model for many other groups. Is there anything that you'd like to ask me about the Parliament?
Yeah, I think one question I had, I guess, is why did you decide to sort of put yourself forward to be the presiding officer, and how did you find yourself on that path?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Ellie. I think it's fair to say that, well, I didn't get involved in politics until I was in my 30s. And that was coming together with a group of neighbours to try to ensure a future for some local playing fields because they were threatened with development at that time. So at no point did I ever think I'd find myself sitting in this chamber. But having got involved in politics and then elected as a councillor and then as a member of the Scottish Parliament, on the night before the vote of the Parliament for the presiding officer in 2021, probably even at that point, I was more minded not to put myself forward. And maybe just a couple of conversations with people, and I thought about the reasons why I wasn't, and I just decided actually it's always been very important to me to see women in positions that other women will see and actually think, well, I could do that too, and why not? So I am the second woman out of 6 presiding officers. I just think it's such an important role, and I did decide that I had a lot to offer. I joined the campaign for a Scottish Parliament before I joined a political party, so that commitment to devolution and bringing power closer to the people and devolved government and what that might mean was really of interest to me. And having had 2 previous sessions and that experience, I just thought I could put it to good use.
Yeah, I think you've done such an amazing job, especially on some of the women's issues that we touched on earlier, making sure that they're really at the forefront. Is there what's your plans for next? What's next after being presiding officer? I guess it's quite a hard act to follow.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been a very busy few years. I think each day is a learning day. That's the one, I absolutely realise how privileged I am. I am just learning all the time. There's always something new or interesting to get your head round. There are many challenging questions. I think just that focus every day on making sure that each and every member has a chance optimally to represent the constituents who have elected them here is such a big role. And afterwards, I'm going to take time to catch my breath and just think about, what the future might look like. I'm definitely going to take some time to catch up with friends and family. It's fair to say the days are long here, and the weeks are fairly full on, so it can be quite easy just to lose a little contact and time for that. And then we'll see. I mean, there's so many the issues that I was passionate about that brought me into politics in the first place. They very much remain with me, so I can't imagine I'll be far from being involved in those.
Yeah, I think a well-deserved break sounds good.
Thank you, that's very kind of you. What do you think the future of the Youth Parliament is? Is there anything that you think it could be doing that perhaps it's not having an opportunity to currently? And why might that be?
It's a really great question. I think that for me, we're so world leading in loads of ways. So when the Scottish Parliament voted unanimously to incorporate the UNCRC into Scots law, that was a big campaign that we were a part of. But I think I'm always thinking, how can we push more? How can we do better? And I think for me, it would be really great if we could increase the turnout of young people who vote in Scottish Parliament elections and that they feel informed. And I think that the Scottish Youth Parliament has a bigger role to play within that than we maybe have realised previously. So I think for me it would be really important that we can have a real impact in that sense.
Okay. And there may be stuff that the Scottish Parliament could do to help bring that about.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that we haven't touched on yet, which is our Scottish Youth Parliament working agreement. And I think for me, I'm so proud of the work that we've done together to get young people more engaged within Parliament, and I hope that long continues.
Yeah, well, it was certainly something to see these benches full of Scotland's young people, just contributing so well. Yeah, I think we should take a step back, before this current session ends and think about what that engagement might look like in the future.
Yeah, I think so, because I think since it was first created, so much has changed in the world and we might want to do new and exciting things. It's a real opportunity.
Yeah, and that whole question of engagement, one of the things we've spoken about, the pitfalls of social media. It can cause harm. There are definitely challenges there with regards to misinformation and disinformation, but it can bring people together and make sure that everyone's got access to information in a way that wasn't previously possible.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's about also empowering young people to use their voice and know that their MSP and their regional MSPs are there to represent them as well. And it's not just older constituents, they are constituents. And so how can they contact them? How can they have their voice heard on issues that they might need support with? And I think a lot of young people don't know that that's even there.
And on that online safety front, I know that the Scottish Youth Parliament has been having a look at the issues there.
Yeah, I think that there are real harms that are on social media and online and in the online world for young people, especially with the rise of sort of AI. But I think the real thing for me personally, we're still looking at the consultation and what young people more widely think on this issue, is that the online harms don't kind of disappear, and actually online harms for young people are also harmful for adults as well. And it's about why is that sort of violence and misogyny happening online, and it's because there's real people who have those views. And so how can we tackle kind of real world harms alongside online harms to make the whole world safer, not just the online world?
And you're also looking to address that misogyny.
Yeah, definitely. We've been doing a lot of work with our gender-based violence campaign, looking at how we might tackle some of these issues, and working with the team at the Scottish Government who are doing a lot of work on kind of how do you educate young men and boys and how do you have that conversation. We were part of a debate within the Scottish Parliament at our sitting, and that then informed the debate for the 16 days of activism for gender-based violence. And I was really proud that it was young women talking to young men about their experiences, and it was being informed by all voices, and it was a really open, challenging conversation.
Because the thing is, to address these issues, we do need to have everyone involved. We need all to champion it. It's not just it's absolutely not just an issue for women, but it's certainly one I feel is being discussed more openly.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's really positive. But I think there also comes a time where we talk too much, and it's now about action and how can we make a real tangible change, which is why I think the things like the gender sensitive audit are so important.
Well, it's fair to say you've very much taken each and every opportunity you've been presented
Yes.
with, Ellie, to make that change. I think you've been doing an incredible job with Scottish Youth Parliament.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's just somewhere that I never really saw myself being. When I first stood for election at 15, I was pretty shy and nervous, and so to even be sitting here today and doing a podcast, it was something that I never thought would be possible for me, and it's just taken me places that I never thought I would go, and so I'm really grateful for that opportunity.
Well, I'm really pleased those opportunities have arisen for you. And you were speaking earlier about the fact it was a modern studies teacher who said, what about this? So obviously we need to make sure that our schools and our educators are aware that this is an opportunity for all young people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think modern studies teachers, be it a local youth worker, I think it's making sure that the adults in the village that are around young people know the opportunities that are there for young people who have specific interests, and to empower young people to get involved in things that they really care about. Because I think that the world's quite a dark place at the moment, and being a young person, it can be really difficult when you look at things that are happening in the world and what your future might be. But I think for me, the reason I've always loved being an MSYP is that there's that glimmer of hope, and there's talking to other like-minded young people who feel the same way as you and want to make change, and that change can still happen even when there's stuff going on in the world that you might not be able to change.
Well, I'm just, I suppose just want to finish off by saying it's really been a pleasure and a privilege working with you these past few years.
Likewise.
I know you're coming up to, a very busy time with your own studies and so on, and I hope the future is good to you, because you absolutely deserve it, Ellie.
Thank you. It's been lovely working alongside you as well.
Thank you.